Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated. I am your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer. It's great to be with you. I'm also the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. Now, real quickly before we get started, you're probably if you notice those things, I'm wearing the exact same shirt I wore last night when I'm after the draft when I made the podcast. Excuse me, on I don't remember if it was Saturday night. We are early Monday morning right now when I'm taping this, very, very early Monday morning. Um, and it's not that I have poor hygiene. I haven't been to bed yet. So I apologize about that. I don't want you to think I have poor hygiene, but I've just been busting my rear and haven't had a chance to even go to bed. So I apologize. I know it looks ridiculous to wear the same shirt, but it's not wearing the same shirt for 2 days in a row. It's wearing the same shirt. Because I haven't been to bed. I want to take a moment real quick. Today, I am going to give you a final recap of the draft, but tomorrow's podcast is going to be incredibly valuable to you. Tomorrow, I am going to call the podcast The Anatomy of the 2024 NFL, the autopsy of the 2024 NFL draft. I'm going to take you back to the end of the season when Tom Telesco was hired. It's going to be like my old in-depth articles. By the way, in the month of May, my next in-depth articles are coming. It'll be a three-parter in the month of May. Don't have the date yet, but it's going to be in the month of May. I assure you of that. But it's going to be an in-depth, and we're going to go through the draft, how the Raiders' brain went, how the thinking went. We're going to dig into the media and how Raider Nation was played like a drum. And we're going to go through and really describe it. We're going to teach tomorrow because I want you, listen, Raider Nation is like St. Louis Cardinal fans in baseball or Toronto Maple Leaf fans in hockey, um, Indiana basketball fans in college basketball, um, Nebraska fans in college football, Laker fans in basketball. They are just the very best fans in football, and they understand the game. But I'm going to take you tomorrow behind the scenes of the draft. What were the Raiders thinking? What's in the media? What did we report to remind you? And what I love about the digital age is everything I say, we don't take it down. So you're going to be able to go back and then listen again to rehash it. And so I want you next year. I just quit doing question and answers because literally I'm getting the same questions about the same things, and people, it wasn't that they weren't listening, our numbers were through the roof. But here's the problem: you can listen and not hear. Now, I had somebody that told me I had that backwards, and I don't. You can listen, you can hear the noise, but to hear is to actively engage, to process. Give you an example. When people have trouble communicating, and if you do this, be very cautious. How many times when you're having a conversation with somebody are you thinking about what you're going to say next? Don't do that. Discipline yourself. This is something my dad taught me, and I was so glad that he did because he taught us at a young age. Don't be thinking about what you're going to say when someone's talking, because if you're doing that, you're not hearing, you're just listening. And what happens is that's where you have a failure to communicate. And so a lot of times we're trained to listen for what we want to hear, for what we want to hear. And it's very, very important. My wife and I have a agreement, a covenant in our marriage that we'll stop and say, sweetie, and she'll do this to me more than I do it to her. Sweetie, I think you're listening, but you're not hearing me. And I'll be like, okay, that's my cue. Whoop, I got to stop, put total attention, make sure I'm not missing anything. And 9 times out of 10, we don't have a disagreement. I just either party wasn't hearing. So I'm going to teach you how to do it, how to be very disciplined, because I don't ever want to see what Raider Nation just went through. It was the worst of the 5 years that I've been covering the team. I want to really take you through how to listen, because it's important to know how to listen. Some people, you almost believe the opposite of everything that they say. Some people will tell you what they think. Some people will kind of mix it up a little bit. And I'm going to take you back, not to Pat Hondo, but I'm going to take you back and remind you of things. And then you can go back and listen. And I think tomorrow will be, in my opinion, and you may disagree, and I really want to hear your opinion. So make sure you give opinions tomorrow in the comment section. I want you to hear, because I want to explain to you. Now, I report differently. And that's not, oh, Hondo's the greatest. There are a lot of great reporters who report the way I do, but there are a lot who don't. My job when I report to you is not to get you to like me, nor is it to get you to agree with the information I'm giving you. My job is to present to you the information. See, I trust you. You're smart. You're not stupid. I don't care what color you are. I don't care about your education. I don't care about your gender. I don't care about your religious or lack of religious affiliation. I don't care about how much money's in your bank. I come and approach life with an optimistic view that people are smart, and if you give them information and they hear, they'll make their own decisions. You don't need me to do that. We lost a lot of people who just said, I'm tired of you defending Aidan O'Connell. I don't know how I defended him, because, and this is not addressing critics, I'm trying to go back and teach. I'm the one that said they're going to sign a veteran and get a rookie. I'm the one going into day 3 on our audio only exclusive podcast who said they could very well add a quarterback today as a UDFA, because I knew what I was being told. And all that's documented. But people were like, no, you just love Aidan for various reasons. And it wasn't that. But my job was to give you the information. And so I remember my family saying, are you going to go back and try to explain to these people, hey, please don't leave. I'm just getting, no, don't do that. Don't chase people. But my job is to just give you the information. And so tomorrow's podcast, you can almost call it, football 201 or probably 301, but we're going to give you some really great stuff. Go back and analyze everything leading up to the draft. And because everything we told you, I had a member of the Raiders organization. I haven't been to bed, so I don't know if it's yesterday or today, but somewhere in this window, well, we're barely into today, but you know what I mean, say to me, man, your draft coverage pre-draft was just spot on. And I take pride in that, not pride in Hondo. I got great sources. They should get all the credit. But the point is, I want to help you and I want to teach you so you can then approach a draft. And what I'm going to teach tomorrow is actually going to make you a better fan, because now you're going to know how to approach the rest of the season. What am I listening for at mini camp? What am I listening for at rookie camp? What am I listening for from OTAs? What am I listening for from training camp? What am I listening for during the season? And then bam, right back into free agency and all of that next year. So I think tomorrow is going to be probably one of the most important podcasts we've done, simply giving you just raw information, pulling back the curtains like it's at Oz. And, when the great Oz says, don't look at the man behind the curtain. That's what it's going to be. So again, I really encourage you to listen tomorrow and really do it when you can listen and hear. Make sure you can hear. And I think it'll be a blessing to you. All right. So let's get back into recapping the draft. Each day I did a quick synopsis of the draft. And I'm not going to get into, again, the behind the scenes. That's all tomorrow. But I want to address a couple of things for you. Now, I've been telling you this. This was my 5th draft. I've been covering the Raiders for 5 years. And I've told you since day one, you can go back and listen to everything we wrote, listening to everything that we've done. It's all saved. There is a term in the NFL where they call people dogs. These are guys who are proven winners. These are guys that you're not worried about them coming in and gee, I wonder if they're going to develop. These are guys that are gym rats. They're not going to miss a day of conditioning. They're not going to miss a day of weight room. They're not going to miss an OTA, even though it's optional because they're football junkies. They're going to watch film. They're going to be in the facility all the time. One of the commenters on last night podcast had a brilliant comment. And I apologize. I should have checked your name. I talked about this was really the Max Crosby draft, and they said, I don't think you're going to just go get a bunch of Max Crosbys. I think you're looking for people that have the Max Crosby kind of the dog mentality, and that's 100% correct. That was a very brilliant point. That's what I mean about you guys being smart. I could have worded that differently, and I 100% agree with them. They weren't being critical in the least bit. They were presenting a point that makes my coverage better. And sometimes if you're not listening to your critics, they're the only ones telling you the truth. That was a great point. So whoever you are, I commend you for that. And I apologize that I didn't get your name to publicly honor you. So they were looking for a certain type of player. I'm going to get into this a little bit more today, not so much tomorrow, but a little bit more today, because I spent a lot of time on it yesterday. And so they would, if two guys are equal, they would go with a younger guy. But the age wasn't the biggest factor, although you saw him draft a lot of young guys. The biggest factor is this a guy that's always in my weight room? Is this a guy that's always watching film? I remember one time there was a player, um, and a particular team wanted to talk to him. And they couldn't get on a cell phone, and they had legitimate concerns. Is this guy out partying? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And they were a little bit concerned, and they called the agent. And the agent laughed and he said, guys, he spends about 10 hours a day in the weight room. And at the place that he works out, they're not allowed to have a phone in there. He's working out. And so they go, oh, can you have him call us? Sure. And they knew you want the guys that love the game. Now, there's another point. Part of that dog mentality of loving the game is you saw Robert Spillane play with a broken hand. You saw Max Crosby play when he risked going septic and actually having his leg amputated. That's how bad it was. I mean, Max Crosby played almost half a season in massive pain that nobody else would have played in. Nobody would have. Well, that's not true, but many people would not have, especially as severe as his. Okay, Robert Spillane breaks a hand, finishes the game, gets a cast, calls AP, hey, I will play Sunday, and did, and played well. You've heard me many, many times stress to you the best ability is availability. So you're looking at guys. Are they guys that are injured all the time? Are they injured all the time? Now, Nate Hobbs is a dog. He plays tough, but he's injured a lot. Okay, they're going to watch that because the best ability is availability. Now, sometimes you can't play. So it doesn't mean when a guy is out and doesn't play, he's a wimp. But I'm going to tell you, I know for a fact there were players in that locker room very frustrated with Darren Waller because they thought he could play at times and didn't. That's why when the Raiders moved on from him, I told you, I'm not blaming that one on Ziegler and McDaniel. I'll blame them for a lot, but not that one. There were players. I had players that, I would say to them just off the record, man, do you expect me to be back this week? And I won't tell you what they said, but it wasn't complimentary. And they didn't hate him at all. Good guy. But look at now, he's looking to get possibly retiring. So that's something that they're looking for. So part of now again, if you're injured and the doctor said you're not playing, that's not on you. But there's a difference between being injured and hurt. There's a difference. And there are some injuries that you just got to be able to play through. Okay. And when you see a Max and you look at a Robert Spillane, Okay. There were times people were a little frustrated with Josh Jacobs. And I know that the Raiders made him a very good offer. And all I'm going to say is they had every right to believe he was going to sign it. They had every right to believe he was going to sign it. And I'm not throwing him under the bus. I like JJ, and you all know I do because I've said it. Great kid. But another one of their concerns is he misses a ton of games. The only time he didn't miss a ton of games, and think about this, was in that fourth year. And then they franchise tagged him. So they're looking for that football rat, the guy with who understands availability is everything. Can I play? It's a yes or no question. Can I play? And then go from there. Another thing that's happening is Antonio Pierce is a very tough coach. Now, you need to understand something. Josh McDaniels was very acerbic and very tough on everybody, including himself, and he deserves credit for that. And I told you, the players respected him because there'd be times he ripped himself. You can be tough on guys, but then there also has to be the loving on guys. That's why sometimes you'll see coaches like Josh McDaniels that are very tough. This is what you did. Then you see guys who like Pete Carroll who are slap you on the back. We got a fraternity party type atmosphere here. Both ways win. And then the third way, and you can go back, I have talked about this for years. So this isn't something I'm just doing for AP. And years ago, before AP was ever a thought of getting this job, I talked to you about how John Madden was that rare mix. John Madden was, and Rich Bisaccia was this way. They were guys that they had a standard and they held you to the standard. You did not waver from that standard one iota. That is the standard. And we're going to put a boot in your butt. We're going to call you out in film session. But they also have that ability, like a Pete Carroll, to run up, grab you, put their arm around you, hug you. Man, I love you. What's going on with your family? Tell me about your kids. How's mom? And to be completely genuine because they do genuinely care. And so this is not an environment for everybody. Now, I believe if you go back and look, I actually had somebody email me yesterday or comment yesterday and just say to me, how can you say people got better under Antonio Pierce? And I literally wanted to answer, how can you say they didn't? The defense becomes number one. They become number one in least amount of penalties. Malcolm Kuntz, anybody? I mean, I can go on and on and on naming players that got better. Numerous. So you can't just kick people in the butt and not love on them. And you can't just love on them without kicking them in the butt. And then once there's an old saying, Jim Tressel, the coach at Ohio State, who's a very dear friend of mine, Jim Tressel at Ohio State used to always say, and he got this from his father, who was a great coach, is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And once you connect with somebody's heart, think back to when you dated your spouse. If you're not married, this would be irrelevant to you, but think about dating was different to when you had their heart. You had their heart. Okay. And the best coaches who develop, you want to know who's great at this? Rod Marinelli. Rod Marinelli is an OG. And for those of you older like me, I just learned this term. It literally means it stands for original gangster. It just means that you're somebody who's older and done something successfully for a long period of time. It's called OG. It stands for original gangster. And Rod Marinelli was an OG. He was one of the toughest coaches I have ever seen on anybody. Never happy. and yet would have the guys over to his house for dinner. I mean, Rod is a friend. And I covered him as a head coach in Detroit, and I covered him in Vegas. And I mean, Max Crosby gets in there, and Rod Marinelli kept his boot right up Max's rear end, and then would hang out with him and love on him, and just totally invested in Max. And so he could say anything to Max, and Max was like, "Yes, sir, let's do it." Okay, he's a dog. He's an availability guy, but he also has that mental mindset of where the Raiders are right now. Now, it doesn't work in Detroit. Rod had that, but he didn't have a staff of people around him who operated that way. Okay, Mike Martz, very acerbic. He was a lot like Bill Parcells, very rarely said anything nice. The guys respected Mike Martz as an offensive genius, but there wasn't a ton of guys that liked him. And I don't think Mike's a bad guy. I always had a great relationship with him, always. But I mean, there were times on the field that he would just, I'm not going to say, but he would just literally rip into people and just walk away. Well, it doesn't work unless they know you care. Now, no, here's the whole point. Parcells was that way, but he had coaches who were that way, but his coaches invested in the players. So they would go and say, hey, that's not what Bill meant. And they were tough too, but they were more loving. Okay, Bill Belichick. Now, I've had the privilege of let's just say being close in proximity to Bill for a long time. Okay, and I like him personally. I like him as a coach. As a coach, as a non-head coach, his guys, you know, he was just football, football, football. He was literally Josh McDaniels. But he kept players around him, coaches around him who were very empathetic. So they would go up and say, Coach is right. You got to get your head out of your butt. That's stupid. That's unacceptable. But man, I love you. And think about what that second contract is going to be and what you get to do for your mom. And think about what it's going to be like getting generational wealth, loving people like Rod. Rod Marinelli was terrific at it, absolutely terrific at it. And I think Rod Marinelli, because of his time in Detroit, you can hear the train, because of his time in Detroit, I don't think he gets enough respect that he deserves. He was a genius at it. So what happens is AP has that. He is the only difference between him and John Madden is he's probably in a little bit better shape than John was when he got the job, and he's black. That's it. They're clones of one another. They're just clones of each other. And so what AP has done, he has gone out and gotten coaches who coach very hard, but who also build relationships. Carmen Brasillo was this way. And again, a few others on the staff. But I mean, Rob Leonard, the defensive line coach, is a genius at this. A genius at this. Marvin Lewis is an OG at it. Joe Philbin. This staff, Ricky Manning, this staff, and I'm leaving guys out, and that stinks, and it's wrong because there's a lot of great one on his staff. AP got a good staff, a very good staff. Now, I give each coach 20 games because you know what? Some of them may not work out, and you got to make some changes. So I give them that flexibility. But I have not seen a coach as good at being dichotomized as I saw from AP last year. Phenomenal. Super impressed. And more impressed when I got to see him in practice and when I got to see him when I was in the locker room. or be around after a game. He was able, guys feared him, but they loved him. And they know he'll cut me, but he don't want to. See, that's interesting. That's an interesting mentality. He'll cut me, but he don't want to. So you have to understand, going into this draft, they were looking for those players because it takes an interesting person. Now, I'm telling you, and I would tell you if I did not believe this, there is not one guy on this Raiders roster. Now, there are some new ones that I don't know yet. So prior to, no, I can say this, after free agency, but prior to the draft, there's not one guy on this team I don't like. Now, there's 2 rookies I'm still waiting to learn a little bit more about their personality, but the 6 rookies I know have fit into this too. And oh, by the way, quick commercial. Coming up this week, we are bringing on either beat writers who covered each of these players or coaches, head coaches who coach them. I mean, we're going to go deep on all 8 draft picks. Y'all going to get some great information in these podcasts. I hope you're listening, man. We're going to have a lot of fun. You're going to know these players so well that you're sitting around at a euchre party drinking some Vernors and having a pasty if you're from Michigan, or if you are from somewhere else, maybe having a margarita and some menudo or whatever. If you follow me on Twitter, you get that joke. I'm making fun of myself. Or, you're going to be down there in Florida eating some fresh shrimp, having yourself a little Mai Tai, and you're going to be able to talk Raiders with some stranger you meet and talk about these players. You're going to know things about them. Most of them don't. I am so excited. I was talking to a couple coaches today and just getting information and planning on them being on the podcast. Now, so they were going in looking for a very certain type of player. Now, you have each position. So they know if it's a safety, they've got to be this tall, weigh this much, and run this. Those are the intangibles that only God can give a person. That's why you got the combine, because you get a real weight, you get a real height, you get a real. So once you know, okay, this meets the criteria, and whatever your criterion is, okay, we want. I know places that want corners 6'1" and bigger. I know people that won't take corners below 6 foot. I know some that don't care as long as the leaping, the vertical's there. Each team's different. So as they established at each position, here is the God-given things they have to have. Now, let's just make something up, and I'm not going to give away any of the Raiders' secrets. Let's say that they said every long snapper has to be a minimum of 6'2" and weigh 250 pounds. We have just found, and when I say we, I'm not talking like Hondo's a Raider fan. I'm using as if the Raiders are talking to themselves. I'm using the Raider voice. They say, hey, take every long snapper off the board who's under 6'2" and 250. Why? Because they've come up with those requirements because they think physically in the long run, that's where a player has to be. Okay, great, whatever. Some people may not have those requirements, but I'm just giving you an example. But most teams have, and it varies, it's a sliding scale, but each team has whatever. So then they say, okay, take everybody off our board who's a long snapper that is below 6'2" and below 250. We're just not even going to look at them because we have our deal breakers. We have our deal breakers. I tell my children, when you date intentionally. Date with the thought that I'm going to protect my heart. Above all else, protect your heart's what the Bible says. And when you find out that you don't think somebody's marriage material, don't date them anymore. Why? Because then you don't lose your heart to them. But you got to have your list of must-haves and I would like. Now, each team at each position has must-haves, and these are the things that God gives them. Then they have things we like, but we are willing to negotiate on these. And then there are things absolutely won't take them with this. Okay, I know some places that if you've been arrested, no matter, even if you were found innocent, you're off their draft board. They don't want to take any risks. I know some places that if you had bad grades in college and you didn't have a GPA above a certain point, they're like, no, you got to be too smart to play this game. Off our board. Okay, whatever. So you have your list of they've got to have this. Here's where we're willing to negotiate. And then down here is where if you have any of these, you're just not an option. Okay. So going in, they wanted dogs. They wanted guys who had the ability, if they couldn't stay healthy, I mean, if they got injured, they still played, unless it was just something they couldn't. You know, if a guy gets a compound fracture, he's not playing on that. But just people that didn't want to come off the field. They weren't looking for reasons to get off the field. Then, and oh, by the way, I'm gonna give you a little insight you're gonna love in a minute. Then they wanted guys who could absolutely take the coaching because they're football rats, and then they had to meet all of the criterion: size, weight, speed. Now, a lot of teams, not going to say if it's Raiders or not, I'm not going to give away any Raider secrets, will have their coaches at practice because they want to watch when reps are going on. Does the guy say, oh, I got to get my ankle taped during wind sprints? Is he taking plays off? Is he taking extra reps? So I know of a guy that was high on the Raiders draft board, and one of the things that they loved about him, and I don't have permission to say who this is, so I apologize, so I'm not going to, but when the scout was watching him in practice, he kept jumping in, taking reps from third and fourth team guys in college because he wanted the reps. That's a junkie. Corian Bennett did that a lot last year. Struggled with confidence. 2/3 of the season. I totally agree with that, but that's why nobody in that building's given up on JB. Nobody has. Not one person. Okay, but they're looking, but JB did it last year during training camp, and I talked about it, but that's not who I'm referring to for this. So they're looking for those guys. Now, let's go back real quick. I was covering Michigan State Spartans when Mark D'Antonio was the coach. You may remember they go to the Rose Bowl, win it. Then the year before the playoff, they beat Baylor in the Cotton Bowl, and a lot of people believe that the year they went to the Rose Bowl and beat Stanford, a lot of people thought Michigan State was the number one team in the country, but there wasn't a playoff, so they didn't get to play Jameis Winston. I personally believe had they played Jameis Winston that year with their defense, they would have beaten them. That's my personal opinion, doesn't matter. But one of the things that hurt Michigan State getting players drafted, and I wrote about it at the time, made the coach a little upset with me, was Michigan State. They were terrible about letting coaches into practice. They were terrible at it. I would have scouts that would call me and say, go talk to these guys, to Coach D'Antonio. What are they doing? They're just hurting their players. Conversely, you go some places, they've got lounges for scouts, computers for scouts. They'll give the scout any film. Scouts are welcome to go in and eat for free. Why? Because in recruiting, they can say, why do we get so many players drafted? Because the scouts are here all the time. If you get the talent and you'll open the doors, the scouts will be there. And that's a big selling point. If you are a parent of a recruit, you need to ask that coach, how open are you with scouts? Now, Alabama that way. Nick Saban was one of the best with scouts. I mean, at Alabama, you could watch every practice. You could get something to eat. They would give you any film that you wanted. They would take you into the lounge. You could watch film right there, send in your reports to your GM or your director of college scouting. I mean, yes, Alabama has a lot of great players. But Alabama gets a lot of great players because they sell them in recruiting. We get our guys drafted. And why did they get their guys drafted? Yes, because they won, but a lot because scouts were able to see how did they take coaching. Okay, so let's keep going now. That's the lead up to what they were coming into this draft looking for. Okay, now there were some dogs. These were guys that you just considered can't misses in this draft. I've never seen more than 7. And I can't remember it, but I do believe there was one draft where there was a lot of good players with first round grades, but I don't remember. I think there was one where people they said there really isn't a dog. This one's a crapshoot. A lot of guys that are first round values, but not dogs. I remember when Khalil Mack came out. Every single scout, every single team that I talked to, he's a dog. He's a dog. I remember there was a guard, and I'm sorry, I'm tired, that the Cowboys picked. That was a guard, and I mean was a dog. There's always those few handfuls. Okay, Joe Alt was considered a dog in this draft. Talise Fawaga was considered a dog, and Brock Bowers. Now, the Raiders, I have to be careful how I word this, so please just let me think for a second. Okay, so the Raiders had those three guys there, and you know there were a couple other guys highly graded, but a couple of quarterbacks, but those that if they could have got to them at the value they thought they were, they would have taken one of those first because quarterback's so important. But that was not going to happen. So at the value that they thought it was worth. So they went into this knowing there's some dogs there. Joe Alt, Talise Fawaga, Brock Bowers. And they play through every scenario. Now, I believe, and I've been reporting for a long time, that they thought they would come out of this draft with Talise Fawaga. Okay. And they would have been thrilled with that pick. Thrilled with it. But if something had happened and Joe Alt had fallen, they would have been thrilled with Joe. Same with Brock. Those guys are all, you know, top 5 grades. Dogs. So the draft's unfolding. Okay. And the Raiders are letting the draft come to them. There, you know, there's people who made calls to the Raiders about moving up. But if they didn't want to pay what the Raiders thought it was looking like, we're going to stay here. Tom Telesco is extremely disciplined. Extremely disciplined. And he knows what the value of a first round pick is, and he knows about the value of where the first round pick is. You know, you can go where I'm from in Michigan and buy a beautiful, nice home for $400,000 that would cost you $1.4 million, maybe $2 million in California. Same house, same amount of property, different place. Tom Telesco understands the value of 1 through 32. So I'm not just going to trade you 13 based on where it is. What am I looking at potentially getting at 13? If I'm sitting at 13 and I think I'm going to get a guy who's a dog, then you better be willing to pay me a dog. Listen, the Bears did not pick a dog. They picked a very, very talented quarterback. But he's not a dog. There are more red flags with him than anything, but he's the most talented player in the draft. And for the Raiders to go to 13-1, from 13-1 was going to cost them, it wasn't available at the end, but when they originally called, 3 1s and 3 2s. So they're sitting there saying, okay, you're not getting spot 13. You're going to be able to get a player with top 5 value. See, that's being smart. Quick analogy. My brother-in-law owned a Corvette that when it first came out was like 20 grand. But now the car's worth well over 100 grand. Well, why? Because when it came out, it was at 20. But the way it's been taken care of and the way the market's gone, it's now worth 100 grand. Okay, so the Raiders may be sitting there at 13, and you say, well, this is what 13's worth according to the trade chart. Well, okay, but Tom Telesco's like, great, we're not living in a trade chart world. The way this board's dropping, I'm going to get a 1, 2, 3 guy. You're not going to pay me like that. And then if you're only going to pay me what I can get, if I go and buy a boat for $50,000 and you say, hey, I want to buy your boat for 50,000, why would I sell it? If I know I'm going to get a 1, 2, or 3, I'm not going to give you up the number 13 for you to pay me 1, 2, 3. That's what I can get in a player. You're going to have to pay me extra. Do any of you think you walk into a store and it isn't marked up from what the store paid for it? That's the reality. And so Telesco is, people say, oh, Telesco doesn't trade. Yeah, he would. But he understands if I'm going to move up, what am I going to get? What's it really worth to me? If I'm going to go from 13 to 1, is the player that I'm going to get worth my 13, my next year's pick, my next year's first round pick, and 3 2s? Is he that valuable? If he is, you make the trade and he would have done it. But if you're like, no, he's not. This is where good teams don't overspend. This is where good teams show discipline. They're not cheap, but they're frugal. They understand, ooh, this is my precious. My pick is precious. If you're going to pry it out of my hands or I'm going to give up other picks, you better know I better be willing. I better be willing. That better be so valuable to me because what I have is precious. So they're sitting there. And unbelievably, Brock Bowers begins to fall because I've said to you all along, there are teams who just don't draft well. There are teams that just fail at it horribly. Okay, let's go back and look, including this year's draft. Including this year's draft, last 10 years, Philadelphia's had one top 10 pick. Why? They're good. Seattle, New England, Rams, Baltimore, Houston, Minnesota, New Orleans, Kansas City. Okay, now let's just go back. Philadelphia, Seattle, New England, the Rams, Baltimore, Houston have all had one pick in the top 10. Minnesota, New Orleans, Kansas City, Philadelphia, Green Bay have all had 0 picks in the top 10. And oh, by the way, they all had good drafts. Why? Because they understand. Now let's look at the teams in the last 10 years who've had the most. Jets, Giants, Jacksonville, Chicago, Atlanta, and then San Francisco. But remember, San Francisco, in the midst of this, changed leadership. Detroit, but they've changed leadership. Both of those teams now, we would agree, are not junk teams. They're playoff teams. Why? Because they changed the leadership to people who approach the draft now. Arizona, Carolina, Cleveland. Drop the mic. So the Raiders came in knowing, here we go, we're going in. We know, I've already went over with you the mentality of the player they were looking for, what they wanted. Again, at each position, they know what they want as far as the intangibles that only God gives, then the things that they don't want, and then they knew the things that they wanted but were willing to negotiate on. And as the board's falling, they could not believe Fawaga and Bowers are coming towards us. They did. And they were able to steal Bowers at 13. And I'm going to tell you right now, it was a steal. You take last year's best tight end in Michael Mayer, and I love Michael Mayer, but he ain't Brock Bowers, and it ain't close. He's good. Michael Mayer is good, but he ain't Brock Bowers. And you go get a guy. Now, he's just like another offensive lineman because he is a vicious blocker. To his credit, so is Michael Mayer. Can you imagine them in a 12 set, which means one running back, two tight ends? You got 7 guys on the line of scrimmage. You got 7 big uglies. Quarterback, a running back, 2 split wide receivers, Jacoby Myers, Devontae Adams, or a Trey Tucker for one of the 3 spots. And you're lining up with 7 guys that want to punch you in the face. They look at you like, all right, you want to hit me and draw blood? Please. Please. Love it. More, please. Just tough, hard-nosed football players. You are developing an offense. You're going to have the mentality of their defense. If you're old enough, you remember Arsenio Hall. Things that make you say, So they get Brock Bowers. Okay. Now, they were looking to get back in the first round. They loved Jackson Powers Johnson. They loved him. He is nasty, like a Richie Incognito. This guy's got Raider written. I mean, he's a Raider. Or like Al Davis, Raiders. I mean, he's just that kind of guy, man. He is just he's him. Can you imagine if they had taken Fuaga and him? It's not a slam on Bowers. Just saying. He was a guard with a Fuaga mentality. JPJ has that Spillane, that Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins. I'm going to fight you in a phone booth. Let's go. While we're at it, let's throw some deadly snakes in the phone booth just to make it fun. While we're at it, let's fill our water bottles with Tabasco. I just so enjoy the game of football when it's played the way the Raiders are going. And that's what they wanted. And they go and get them. Now, you come to the third round and you know that they needed a tackle. Now, I've been talking about this, and people have, and we'll get into this more tomorrow. They are happy with Thayer Munford. Would they have taken a Fuaga, in place of a Bowers if Bowers hadn't been there? And you go back and listen now. You heard Telesco say, I think it was the 3rd day of the draft, and I put the video up for you to listen to. You're not going to build your offensive line in 1 year. Okay, so you got Thayer and Glaze. Now, let's talk a minute about Delmar Glaze, DJ Glaze. This is a guy, on all of his pass attempts last year, only 2.8% of the time did he fail. This is a guy 6'4", 315 pounds. Oh, by the way, JPJ also was a Remington Trophy winner, best offensive, best lineman in college football. Yeah, the Heisman for linemen. So Delmar has all of this size. Now, if you go back and listen to the post day 2 video with Tom Telesco, you'll hear me and him talking about this. I was told by multiple teams that Delmar was a very interesting prospect, but when he went to the Senior Bowl, he blew it up. Absolutely. Now, why? I'm going to take you inside for a minute. At the Senior Bowl, he got significantly better coaching. Now, I'm not ripping on the coaches at Maryland, but there's a reason that you're a coach at Maryland and maybe not at the NFL level. And the first couple days there, he struggled. Now, remember, he comes from the Big Ten, but at the Big Ten, you're not going against the best edge rushers week after week. There are some that are really good, but not week after week. Like in the NFL, every week you're going against somebody really good. This is why the Pro Bowl is the Senior Bowl is so important, because every kid there is going to play in the NFL. So he gets down there against the best competition he's ever played in his life. And day one was rough for Delmar. But the coaches begin to coach him. And remember, coaches are standing around. So he's got the coaching staff. He also has coaches that are interviewing him, telling him some things. He took the coaching. And the last 3 days of the Senior Bowl and in the game, dominated. Absolutely freaking dominated it. Killed it. Killed it. So the Raiders are like, all right, this kid takes coaching really well. He's not a guy that you're going to worry about availability. When they're there at Maryland checking him out, they find out high IQ, great kid, always in the weight room watching film. He's a football rat. He loves to attack people. Just go put on his highlights and once he gets his hands in you, it's getting to know you. Remember that commercial? Bam, he's got you. You watch him on his highlights. I was told by someone at the Senior Bowl, a coach at the Senior Bowl, that if you watch Delmar Glaze day 3, 4, 5 and in the game, no one got by him. He gets his body square, his feet. And I talked to them and I said, your passing coverage is very, very good. If you have an area to improve, it's running, but that doesn't mean it's bad. He loves to just go hot people. Loves it. So the Raiders had a list of offensive tackles that they felt like if we come out of this draft with one of these guys, we're happy with this. There had been a big run, so they knew, okay, we got to take Delmar while we're here. Now, I was told it was a high 4th round grade, late 3rd round grade. So did they pick him a little bit early? Yep. But if you feel like he can be him and he's got everything that you want, and you feel like I got to get one of these tackles, then you take them when you have to take them. Now back to JPJ for a minute. I know for a fact that there were several teams that had big time 1st round grades on him. Big time. He was the best interior lineman in the draft. You go back and look, and there's some people that drafted some guys that were interior linemen that good players, 2nd round grades. And whatever. And I know one team specifically that they had him pegged for their 1st round pick. But just like the Raiders with Bowers, there were so many bad picks. Their guy was there when they picked, but they never thought JPJ would be there. So they nabbed him. But their guy was there, and it pushed JPJ down. But I know multiple, so they get him in the 2nd round. He was an A grade. Then I just told you about Delmar. So Delmar is a guy that's going to compete day one, going to compete day one. Day one. He's coming in to compete. Now, so let's talk about those first 3 grades. I give an A+ and an A+ because you got your first 2 guys higher than where you thought their value was. I mean, below where their value was. Now, go back and watch yesterday's podcast. It would not be fair for the daily listeners to go back and spend 20 minutes explaining about how you evaluate a pick. But I taught about that yesterday and I got a ton of email, hundreds of them, from people saying, man, thank you. I never understood that. Appreciate it. So if you didn't watch it, I really encourage you to go back and watch it. Please. And then Delmar, I'm going to give him a B plus. I love everything about the kid. If they had gone and been able to trade back, but if they would have traded back, they wouldn't have got him. And then they would have been stuck not getting one of the tackles they wanted. So if they get him lower, I would have called it an A minus. If they got him lower in the third, got him in the fourth, I would have called it an A. But where they got him, I'll call it a B plus. But if he turns out to be what you think he is, that's an A pick. B plus. Now, then we come to DeCamerion Richardson. I want to tell you about this kid. PFF had him as their number one. I believe it was the term they used was athletic corner in the draft. May have been physical, but I think it was athletic. I tweeted it out. You can go find it on my Twitter timeline. This is a guy, and let me just read you these numbers. He runs a 4.3. I'm just going to check my glasses because I'm going to tell you something. I don't even know I could go 4.3 in my truck. 4.3. And he's 6'2". Now, everyone's like, well, he's a project. No. He's raw. It's got to be developed. But he started in the SEC, the best conference for football, top to bottom. You could say the Big Ten because the national championship came from there. But when you look top to bottom, it's clear the SEC. He started for 2 years there. Now, interceptions was not his thing. Part of that was because he was the best corner and didn't get as many balls thrown his way. That's truthful. But he had massive numbers of breaking passes up. He was not afraid to be physical. And you got to remember, in the Patrick Graham system, he wants those guys on an island. So you have to, that first 5 yards, you got to be physical. Listen, I know Jack Jones ain't the biggest guy in the world, and I know Nate Hobbs isn't. I know Jacorian Bennett isn't. I know Brandon Faison isn't. And I know DeCamerion isn't either. I mean, isn't the biggest guy on the field. But all those guys have one thing in common. In that first 5 yards, we're getting physical with you. We're going to get physical. I'm really looking forward to watching and the Raiders corners this year, but we're going to get physical with you. And I say we, I'm speaking from a Raiders voice, not as from a fan using the we term. And so they got a guy here that met all their intangibles. He's got better height than what we want. He's got better speed than what we'll take. He's super physical. He is so coachable. He loves film. He's a dog. He's always there. He's always playing. See, you can't teach that. You can't teach it. Many of you know College Football Hall of Fame member and Hollywood superstar actor for many, many years, former pro football player Bob Apisa. He's from Hawaii, but he's Samoan, and he's one of my best friends. Bob and I are very, very close in Arlena. Love him dearly. But a big Hollywood star. He was in the Die Hard movies and College Football Hall of Fame member, but a great, great friend of mine. Again, from Hawaii, he's Samoan. And we were talking earlier on the phone. Well, this is early Monday morning, but late Sunday. We were talking on the phone about, there are some things you can't teach. I can't make a guy be 6'2". That comes from God. I can't make a guy run a 4.3. It comes from God. There are some things that just cannot be taught. But when you have all of the things that only God can give and the mentality to get better. Remember, Bobby Knight said this to me. It's not the will to win. Everyone says, oh, you got to have the will to win. Bobby Knight, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit, but Bobby Knight one time told me that's the biggest blankety blank, 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 blank. To which after we got done, and I told him, you're the only person I know that can use the F word as an adverb. Oh, I love Bobby. But it's the will to prepare to win. That's the key. That's Decamerion. So you may say, well, I like this guy better. Okay, now I saw some people on the internet complaining, well, we could have got this guy, we could have got this guy. And I laughed a little bit because those guys were good college players. But one of them, a lot of people were talking about, was injured a lot. And another one, a guy that they were talking about, was more of a zone corner or not a press corner, more of a, you know, a zone corner. So that doesn't fit with the Raiders. Well, why didn't we get this guy? He had this many interceptions. He was this good. Okay, but he doesn't fit the scheme. If I drive a Ford F-150 Super Cab, and if I needed a tire, and so I went and bought a Corvette tire, it ain't gonna fit on my truck. They're both tires for vehicles, but they're not tires for the same vehicle. So some of you were comparing guys that weren't apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So they had Decamerion very, very high. They just really liked him. Liked every single thing about it. The way he approached the game, first guy in the locker room, last guy to leave, would watch film, good grades, and just he worked hard, great teammate. He was part of the we, not me club. He is, he's got the things you can't teach with all the things that only you can bring to the table. I remember one time my brother was going to leave a job. My dad goes, why? And he goes, I don't like the people. My dad goes, you understand, if you leave your job, there's going to be people at your next one. And oh, by the way, you're going to your next job. Maybe you should try to get along with the people you work with first. You want that guy. You want that guy that's going to come into your locker room, and when everyone says, hey, you want to do some extra reps on the jugs machine? No, man, I got to go. Yeah, let's do it. You want that guy when Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew calls in the middle of the summer and says, hey, y'all want to go over to Sunset Park, throw some balls, and we'll get the wide receivers to go, and you guys go as DBs and you can work on protection? Yeah, let's go. All in. You want those guys on mini camp. You don't even wonder if they're going to show up. I mean, the OTAs, optional team activities. Gee, I wonder if this guy's going to show up. You know he's going to be there. Decamerion. Okay, now again, this is a guy that you got a third-round grade on. A low third-round grade, but you pick him up in 4. I like this a lot. I give it a B. Very good pick. Very good pick. Okay, now you come to Tommy Eichenberger. Let me tell you about this guy. They had a third-round grade, a high third-round grade on him. And you're in the 5th freaking round. So you come into this guy. Now, remember I talked at the beginning about this guy played at Ohio State with 2 broken hands. He is just a football junkie. Now, I'm going to explain something, and I want you to hear me out. He is a very intelligent kid off the football field. Very intelligent. I was told, and later this week, we're going to do a podcast with somebody about him, that a lot of people thought, oh man, maybe he's just a dumb football player, because his whole mentality is all football. And they said it's absolutely not true. He was great in the classroom, great kid, super smart. It's just football was his passion. Okay, my son Dexter's 20 months old. Okay, he loves playing with trucks, loves it. It's his passion. He loves it. Trucks and balls, footballs, great. Paw Patrol balls, great. Dodgeballs, great. Just loves them. Baseballs, although we got to use cloth ones. I learned a tough lesson. Sorry, Shannon. But anyways, it's what he's passionate about. This guy's just super smart. And that because, and someone said to me, if you just talked with him, you'd think he's only football. But what makes him such a great player, a lot like Robert Spillane, he can get guys. Now remember, it's one thing if I'm a player to be able to read the defense and know what I'm going to do before the play is called. But remember what Irvin Johnson told me. Magic, you guys know him as Magic. Remember what Irvin told me. Great players are good players who make everybody better. So you can be a good player, not great, but to go from good to great, you just got to be good, but make other people better. So I've told you about how Robert Spillane reads the play so quick that now he's moving linemen and he's moving linebackers and he's pointing to safeties and corners. It's the ability to see it is one thing, and that's you want every player to have that. But it is a rare gift from God. And your inside line, your linebackers have got to be the quarterback of the defense. If you can see it so fast that then you can tell other people what to do. It's Tommy Eichenberg. And you got this guy in the 5th freaking round. I will be stunned, barring injury, because you never know if somebody's going to get a career-ending injury. But he's an availability is his best ability guy. So if that guy gets injured and can't play, you know there's nothing he could have done. He'll play in the league 10 years. He's just that guy. Instantaneously, he's going to play on all your special teams. Kick off, kick receive, punt, punt receive, extra point, field. He's on all of them. He's just foaming at the mouth. May I play, please? This is a guy that's going to follow Robert Spillane and Max Crosby around like the Pied Piper, man. I am your Padawan learner. Yes, my master. Because he's going to get around guys who are freakish about football like him and just feel like he fits in. Now, I was told by a former NFL scout who's retired and lives in Ohio that he reminded him of Jack Lambert. Jack Lambert. If you don't know who he is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Tackling machine, just beast. This is a guy that is going to push Divine Diablo. He's going to push Luke Masterson. He's going to push a lot of people. He's got a shot in year 2. Wouldn't be surprised in year 1, not really predicting that, but he's got a shot. And Robert's going to get an extension. But when Robert's done, you're still going to have yourself Tommy Eichenberg. He's a football player. That grade, easy for me. A+. A+. Home run. Home freaking. Again, go back and watch yesterday's to understand how I value a pick. So then you come into Dylan Laube. He's 4'5". 4'5", excuse me. He ran a 4.5. And when they graded him out, and they looked at him. This was a guy they had a much higher rated grade than the 6th rounder, a much higher grade. To be very honest, I told you last night what the grade is, but I can't read my writing and haven't been to bed, so I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm going to have to go back and look. But they had a much higher grade than the 6th round. Now, this kid comes from New Hampshire. I'm going to tell you right now, I had a lot of people emailing me, this was the worst pick of the night. He's not going to make the team. Okay, I don't know, but I know the Raider people that I talked to told me, oh, he's making our team. He going to make the team. They fully expect this 6th round. Now, remember, I tell you this all the time. The anticipation is the first 5 rounds will make the team. You hope the 6th and 7th make the practice squad. They get a guy with a lot higher rating than 6, running back, great pass catcher, not the biggest guy in the world, but he'll smash your kidneys blocking. He's going to be your punt returner, your kick returner. He can juke, he can twitch. There's an old saying, stop on a dime and give you 9 cents change. I mean, just boom, gone. Cut and go. Wham, gone. Okay, still in Law Bay. You get a 6th rounder that you think is going to make the team that has a much higher grade than that, you stole him. Hey. Now, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Then you come to the 7th round, 2 picks. Now, let me tell you about the first pick, 223, safety Trey Taylor, Air Force. Thorpe Award winner for the best defensive back in college football. Big kid, strong kid, tough kid. He picked Air Force Academy above other schools because he said, I'm not going to be able to play in the NFL forever. I want a great education. I don't want a good one. I want a great one. He served our country at the same time. Great kid. Again, they had a higher grade. They had a 5th round grade on the kid. A lot of people like this kid. He is just a thumper. He's going to play every one of your special teams, every one of them. Every one of them. And he's a guy that I think is absolutely going to compete. Absolutely going to compete to play. I was told by someone I trust, who I trust greatly, that he was one of the toughest players they have ever seen in their career. Just absolutely unafraid of nothing. A heat-seeking missile, would just dive into plays as a safety. I was told, and I can't find film of it, that it was not uncommon where he would take on a pulling guard coming up in a run play and just push the guard right into the player. Plays with a mean side of nasty. One person who knows him well that I know connected to the Air Force Academy said he is polar opposite. He's an absolute demon on the field. And he uses the term, he was Michael, the angel, off of it. He said it was almost, and then I'm not making fun of mental illness. He said it was literally almost bipolar. He stepped over the line and he just became somebody different. 5th round grade. Now, this is a guy at safety, and I kept telling you leading up to the draft, they need a safety. I knew this is a guy they like. I knew this was a guy they targeted. There were others, so I'm not pretending like I knew everything in the world about him, but it was a name that I was aware of. And they got him. Now, there were several guys that fit his mold. Not several, but a few. And so because the way the board was falling out, they were able to get a Delmar or they were able to get an Eichenberg or whatever because they knew, okay, there's going to be enough of these guys here for our next pick. Then finally, and by the way, that was a great pick. And then we come to MJ Devonshire. This guy, let me just read you some stuff about him. 4.5. This guy had a 6th-round grade. Excuse me, that's not true. A 4th and 5th round grade on him, depending on who you talk to. The people I talked to, he was either 4th to 5th round. Now I'm talking about NFL people. I don't care what media thinks. I don't care what I think. I want to know what the people who are going to pick him. And this kid, tough as nails. Now his head coach at Pittsburgh, Pat Narduzzi, many of you know this, is literally one of my best friends. Him and his wife Donna. We fish together. Our friends are family. We've watched his children all grown up. Love you, Pat and Donna. And Pat's been on the show before. Pat's going to be on the show later this week to talk about him, the head coach of Pittsburgh. And you're going to hear a lot more. This kid is very, very tough, very, very physical. And this kid is going to bring an element to the Raiders. Now, last year was an absolute anomaly that the Raiders had every single one of their draft picks make the roster. That just doesn't happen. This Raider roster is very loaded with a ton of talent. I believe all 7 of these guys are talented enough to make the team. I don't know how a couple of them don't get on the practice squad, just knowing the talent that is on the roster. Now, maybe, and I'm not going to use any names, but maybe they say, hey, you know what? This guy's not as good as a veteran we have, but he's cheaper. He's going to be on the team longer. I understand that we're going to get rid of a guy that's not as good, but this guy's ceiling right here as a veteran is right here. We know he's not going to go higher. This guy is a rookie here. He's cheaper, but his ceiling's here. So if we take him now, we're thinking long term. It's building for the future. So I could see some of that. I think this is going to be a completely competitive camp. And remember, come June 2nd, even after you pay your rookies, they're going to have, I think it's just over $40 million in cap space after they let Jimmy go on June 2nd. $40 million. They're not done in free agency. They're not done. Who knows? Could be a trade. Maybe. I'm not, and that's not anything's imminent. I know before the draft, they were looking at some possible trades. You're sitting there with 40 mil. 40 mil. Now you can go to some teams who say, hey, I'm going to let this guy go. And all of a sudden, there's a guy you really like and you know a team. This is where Telesco is a genius. I was told this by other people. He will have each team's board now available to him, probably on his computer. So he starts looking, all right, let's look. Boy, the Eagles have a bunch of these guys. They selected this rookie, and they know he's not going to make it through waivers, so they're going to have to let somebody go. Who are they going to let go? Probably that veteran. Now you can go to a veteran that maybe has a big contract, who's a good player, but a team says, I just can't afford him. And now Telesco can say, hey, you know what? You want a deal? We'll take over his contract and give you a 7th, a 6th. Those are guys you expect to make your practice anyways. Maybe he's really good. Maybe you think he's a first-round talent, but we'll give you a 4. We got the money to take over the contract. Just saying. Just saying. Like my teenage son says, facts. So there is how the whole draft came together. Someone emailed me and they weren't being a jerk and just said, Hondo, it sounds like you just love every player. No. I absolutely love every one of these players and where they were picked. But those of you that have followed me for 5 years know there's some times I've been hypercritical. I called the Damon Arnett pick a fireable offense. I've called other picks and said, this makes no sense. But see, my opinion doesn't matter. It's AP and Telesco's opinion because they're the one that's going to get fired. Remember how many of you emailed me because you wanted to dump Derek Carr for Trey Lance because he's better than Patrick Mahomes. I would just get rid of Derek, trade whatever I had to get up and get Trey. Okay, you'd be fired now. Not because Derek's the greatest quarterback in the NFL. He's not. But you would have given up a ton to go get a guy who was a bust, plus everything you gave up. Plus everything you gave up. So I trust the people. I trust the people who put their jobs on the line to make the pick. Listen, my opinion does not matter. But when I know what the Raiders thought of them, that's how I'm rating the pick. Now, you and I both know the thing that matters most is when we grade them in 10 years. We already know that. We ain't playing. We ain't fooling around. We know that. But we can only grade up to today. Now that these players have arrived, now it's up to them to determine their grade. This was a great draft for the Raiders. It's the best they've had in the 5 years I covered the team, and I give it an A based on what they feel about it, where they had guys rated, not based on what I think, not based on what the internet thinks, not what a Twitter GM thinks. And you may disagree and be 100% right. I'm telling you what they feel. And based off of their observation, and they're the ones paying the bill, putting their jobs on the line, A. There's your complete recap of the 2024 Las Vegas Raiders NFL draft. Now, tomorrow is the anatomy of the 2024 draft. I am begging you to watch it. It's all Raiders. We're going to go back to when Telesco and when AP were officially hired, all the way through the draft. I'm going to show you how the pieces all came together, how everything came together, quarterback evaluate, all of it, every single detail. I'm probably going to bore you with details, but you know what? I would rather bore you with details than to just sit up here and speak hyperbole and give you nothing of substance. I said this before. My job is to not get up here and have you, oh, I like Hondo. I mean, I hope you do. I like you. It's not like everybody wants people to hate him. But when people said, oh, all you're doing was pimping for Aiden O'Connell, there is no chance he plays next year. Okay. Thank God you don't get fired from the internet when you have those takes and you're wrong. But Telesco and AP do. My dad taught me a long time ago, when you're judging in a situation, pay close attention to the people who have the most to lose. Everybody has an opinion, but who has skin in the game? That's a big deal. That's a real big deal. Don't tell me how to live my life. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. It's your life. You only get one. Only get one. Great draft for the Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders are exponentially better right now. And come June 2nd, they're going to be even better. They're in great shape financially, great shape on the roster. Tomorrow we get into it a lot. The rest of the week, we are bringing in people to break down each of the draft picks for you. And like I said, we're bringing in Pat, and we're bringing in head coaches. We're bringing in beat people that covered them, that know them. Oh, we're bringing it now. This next, I mean, I try to bring you great podcasts every day, but man, hold on to your seat. It's going to be a ride. Man, I love talking football, and I know you do too. Thank you for watching. Would you take a minute, subscribe, hit the like button, share this video, please? You may remember everything we give you. Do you know that we did something like 40 articles during the draft? 40 plus all the videos. And it's completely free. We don't charge you for our content. And the way we do that is the way we keep it growing. And we got a big staff now. And so if you want us to keep it free and you love it, I'm just asking you then, share, like, subscribe, get it out there, tell people about it. I want you to know I appreciate you. I love Mondays. I love them. Don't you be a person that says, oh, Mondays suck. No, you get up and jump out of your bed and you have a great attitude. You're alive. Don't you let your customers, if you're in business, because guess what? They're the ones hung over and hanging up and dreading a Monday. You get up and get a head start on the week. I'm glad we got a head start together today. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. You're the best, Raider Nation. I appreciate you. We'll see you tomorrow.